Welcome to Missouri Genealogy, Repositories, and Resources. So a little bit about me. I am a professional genealogist and historic interpretive guide. So I also work as a museum specialist for St. Charles County Parks. I am also the public relations director for the Missouri State Genealogical Association, the secretary for the National Genealogical Society Delegate Council Steering Committee, and I am a consulting genealogist for local book publishers. So let's just jump on in. So starting with a very brief timeline of Missouri history, there's a longer one in the handout, but sort of hitting the highlights here. So 1673, Jacques Marquette and Louis Joliet, they're the first Europeans to visit what is now Missouri. 1682, France claims the Louisiana Territory. 1764, St. Louis is founded by Pierre Laclede and Auguste Chouteau. Those are big names around here as well. We have a lot of things named after them. 1787, this is sort of a big one to keep in mind in terms of genealogy and migration routes. The Northwest Ordinance was issued. This prohibited slavery north of the Ohio River, and that caused sort of a mass migration of French slave owners to move west of the Mississippi into the St. Louis region. 1803, Louisiana Territory transfers to the United States. 1812, the Louisiana Territory now becomes the Territory of Missouri after Orleans became the state of Louisiana. And in 1821, Missouri becomes the 24th state in the Union. So things to keep in mind in Missouri genealogy. Statewide birth registration was not required until 1910. Now, some records can be found as early as the 1840s. This is because registrations were by county level, and they are not actually mandatory though. So you really never know what you're going to find. Marriage records begin with the creation of each county. So those are going to range from 1804 up to 1889. That's when the last county was formed. Again, so you never really know what you're going to find. It all depends on that county. Now, prior to 1883, deaths are recorded in the city of St. Louis, not the county, but the city, and Kansas City. Counties are required to record death certificates from 1883 to 1893. That ends due to mass non-compliance. So between 1883 and 1893, you're really going to be lucky if you can find really any sort of death record outside of St. Louis or Kansas City. They do become required statewide in 1910, sort of mass compliance, though you don't have until 1911. Migration patterns. Keep in mind, Missouri is sort of the starting place for the Oregon Trail, the Santa Fe Trail, and the Southwest Trail. And all these connect to not all of them, the Oregon Trail connects to the California Trail, Santa Fe connects to the Spanish Trail. So if you know one of your ancestors was on one of these trails, took one of these trails to go west or south, look for records in Missouri. They might have spent some time there before they moved. Also keep in mind, the Trail of Tears does run through Missouri as well, so you have these 3 different routes. If you know your ancestor took part in the Trail of Tears, look for one of these routes. They may have been on it. If your ancestors were not Cherokee or Native American, they may have been a soldier leading these routes. So again, if that applies to you, make sure you try and check those records. Now, the St. Louis region has what we call the Great Divorce. So prior to 1877, the city of St. Louis was part of St. Louis County. It was the seat of the county. There was a vote held in 1876 that said the city will become independent from the county. So why is this important? Because after 1876, St. Louis, when you see St. Louis on a record, it can refer to either the county or the city. Most people did not take the time to specify, so you want to look for records in both places. So if you can't find it in the city, look for it in the county. So before 1876, all city and county records were kept by the city of St. Louis. You're going to find those still in various offices within the city. After 1876, city records, they're housed in various offices in the city. County records are in various offices in the county seat, which is now Clayton, which is sort of just outside the city limits now. So, what repositories and archives do we actually have in Missouri? So, start with the Missouri State Archives, right? There are over 336 million pages of paper, 850,000 photos, 9,000 maps, 72,000 microfilm reels, 1,000 cubic feet of state documents, and 1,000 audio and visual records. So some of these records are going to include territorial and early statehood records. So these are going to go back to the early 1700s when this area was part of French and Spanish Louisiana. Now, most of those records are going to be in French or Spanish. They also have state government publications, legislative records, land records, manuscripts, military records, 1812 to World War I. Now, these are specific to Missouri soldiers. So if your ancestor was in, one of the wars, St. Louis does also have the National Archives that has military records. A lot of you probably have requested records and been denied because there was a fire in the 70s. I've had it myself. So these records are going to be just 1812 to World War II Missouri soldiers. They also have family and community histories and county and municipal records for all of these different county offices. Missouri Digital Heritage. Now, this is run by the Missouri State Archives through the Secretary of State. This is probably the most popular digital website to use in Missouri genealogy. And it is wonderful and amazing, and I use it almost every time I'm doing research. You can browse here by topic. And so these are all the different topics that you can choose from. So if you go down to genealogy, if you need Boone County, your ancestor was in Boone County in the Civil War, you're going to find a database that you can browse, and you're going to have all these scans. There's pictures, there's documents. So not only on genealogy, business and industry records, military records, science and nature. So it is a wealth of information if you want to research by topic. You can research by the type of media you're looking for, by the institution that created or that houses those records as well. Now, they also have birth and death records pre-1910. I will say this is, again, that's hit or miss. It all depends on whether you happen to have one of those ancestors whose county coroner just happened to decide to keep the record that day. Now, one of the most popular databases, sort of what Missouri genealogy is known for, is the death certificate database, 1910 to 1973. And now this updates every April. So next April, it will go up to 1974. This is all archived by volunteers. The easiest way to do this, I know my great-great-grandpa, William Dressler, I know he dies in, Henry County. I know he dies in 1914. So if you know all this information, so this is the problem. Because I have contains filled out, I know off the top of my head because I looked at it often, William is actually abbreviated. So it doesn't contain William. It's not going to let me find it either. That's because I'm trying to show you, right? So let's search. Okay. Carl William Dressler. There we go. And so then it brings up a scanned copy of that death certificate. So if you know, your name, if you don't really know anything, if you don't know the county, search all counties, search all years. It's going to take you a long time. Now, another thing to keep in mind, you can search by a spouse or the name of a parent, but that's only for death certificates 1955 to 1973. So if it's before that, you do have to know the deceased name. I also recommend either doing a starts with or a contains, because some of these transcriptions are not correct. So just keep that in mind when you're searching. They also have databases for coroner's inquests, census and tax lists. Some of these you will not find on like Ancestry or MyHeritage as either. Elected officials archived websites, provost marshal's index, judicial records, Missouri Supreme Court historical database, land records, naturalization records, as well as the Missouri State Penitentiary database. So, hey, if you have an ancestor who served any amount of time in the Missouri State Penitentiary, they're going to be in here. So my great-great-grandmother, her second husband served time in the Missouri State Penitentiary. So his name was Samuel Butcher. So you search that name, it helps if you spell it right. Search. So this is what's going to pop up. Samuel Butcher, he's the offender. He was 23. He served time for grand larceny. Now you want to go to view record details. And you can see this list. Okay, he works as a laborer when he went to court. But then make sure you go down to view numerical register, because this is going to bring up the actual register book. And this has more information. So Samuel Butcher, he's a laborer. It also has his height. This is one of my favorite things. Length of foot in inches. So his right foot's 7 inches, his left foot's 10 inches, right? So it's just like quirky little things. Dark complected, he has a mustache. Habits of life, he was intemperate. So he was essentially a drunk, right? I know that from my great-great-grandmother. And so marks and scars. Now, this does also list living relatives. So this lists, he has a mother still living. But on his right forehead, he has a birthmark. He has a scar on his upper lip. His right foot is crippled. Okay, so that's going to explain why his right foot is 3 inches shorter than his left foot. So you never really know what you're going to find in here. We also see that he was discharged a year before his sentence was over. So he got out early for grand larceny. It's the Missouri Historical Society Library and Research Center. Now this is located in St. Louis, and they have just tons of information here. So documents and archives. Each of these are going to be a separate department. So within documents and archives, some of their databases you're going to find are information about Lewis and Clark. These are the original collections. Thomas Jefferson papers, World's Fair records, Charles Lindbergh papers. Their library, that's where you're going to find business and trade catalogs. So if you know your ancestor worked at the specific company, look at these business catalogs because they might be named somewhere in them. They have books on fur trade and exploration, Native American history and culture. They even have original pieces of sheet music. Their multimedia records, they have St. Louis radio and TV broadcasts, including news B-roll footage. They have documentaries, ads, home movies, musical recordings, photos and prints. So they have Native American photos, George Catlin lithographs, daguerreotypes and family photos. They have an objects and artifacts section. So these are going to include more things that were donated by families. And then they also have, this sort of is more of an online portion of house histories. So you can search an address and try to see when a house was built, did anything significant happen there? This is more geared towards city houses, but always take a look. Now, the State Historical Society of Missouri, different from the Missouri Historical Society. So the State Historical Society, they're headquartered in Columbia, Missouri. Now, Columbia is going to have records on every county in this dark blue section here. They also have older collections statewide, as well as the newspaper collection. Now, they do have a wonderful newspaper archive on their website that they are working to digitize old Missouri newspapers. Cape Girardeau, they're going to focus on records for these southeastern counties. Kansas City, Rolla, St. Louis, and Springfield. So be sure when you go to their website, you can browse by all of these different collections. So you'll see there's art, digital, manuscripts. So manuscripts in particular, those can be further browsed by research center, subject, or a specific county. So you can go in and see, I want to know what manuscripts the Rolla building has. So you can go in and see that. They also have maps, newspapers, oral history, recordings, photos, and reference sections. The Midwest Genealogy Center at the Mid-Continent Public Library. So they actually have a circulating collection, which is rare among genealogy libraries and societies. So they have 23,000 books available through interlibrary loan nationwide. So it is worth looking at their collections at their website to see if they have the book you need. If you go in person, they also have open stacks, another sort of rare thing in genealogy libraries. They have rare books, which include family Bibles. So if you go to their website, go onto that family Bibles page, they have them listed in alphabetical order, and these are scanned on their website. They do only include those pages that are genealogically relevant, so you don't have to, search through the whole Bible. There's not a lot, but it is worth looking at if you have a family in Missouri to see if that last name is there. Now, the St. Louis County Library headquarters has the Emerson History and Genealogy Department. So they have their newspaper collection, a microfilm of over 50 Missouri newspapers. Now, these include newspapers specific to African Americans. They have German language, Polish, Czech, French, Jewish, Hungarian, and Italian language newspapers, religious records. So they really focus on Catholic, Methodist, and UCC records, but their Catholic records, they include a database of the diocese from Spanish and French Louisiana, which is just sort of an interesting thing. I don't have any family back that far, but they have a history and genealogy virtual classroom. So if you go onto their website, they have webinars, uploaded webinars that you can view from different topics. They also have a memory lab. So if you're ever here in person, you can schedule a time. It does need to be scheduled. You can bring in photos, home videos, audio recordings, and have those uploaded onto a USB drive. So you can have that in a digital format. They also do lookup requests online. So if you're out of state, send them an email of a book you need, what page number you need. They can scan that and email that to you. They also have a Book a Genealogist feature. So if you just are at a loss of where to go next in your Missouri genealogy, this is a free feature. So just make an appointment. I don't believe it has to be in person, and they can help you out with that. The St. Louis Mercantile Library should be used more. So this is the oldest continuous library west of the Mississippi River. Now this was the building in 1889. It has since moved to the University of Missouri in St. Louis, but their collections focus on westward expansion, transportation, and the development of St. Louis. But they also have the Herman Teapot National Inland Waterways Library. So if your ancestors, say, worked on a riverboat or worked in any kind of shipping on any river. This is not just the Missouri or the Mississippi River. This is nationwide. Look through these business records. They also have the John Behringer National Railroad Library. So same thing. If your ancestor worked for a railway, look through these corporate records because you never know what you'll find. My great-great-grandfather, Carl Dressler, whose death certificate I pulled up, he worked for a railway. He is named in one of these corporate histories as a new employee. Does it add much, genealogical value? I think so, because now I know what railway he works for. Did it take a long time to sort through and find? Absolutely. But it's always exciting to actually see your ancestor's name in one of these records. So other resources, the Missouri State Genealogical Association. We publish a journal every quarter, and these include records from all over the state. So they can be family histories, they can be cemetery transcriptions, or, they're just full of random articles relating to things in Missouri. They can be county histories. I have a diary from my great-grandfather who went on a wagon train journey down to Arkansas. So I published that journal entry that he kept on that trip. We also have the First Families program. So if you have Missouri ancestors, that they were here before Missouri became a state, you can apply for a certificate for that, territorial certificate. We have a pioneer certificate. So I believe that's from Missouri statehood, and I can't remember what year that goes up to. We have the Civil War. So if your ancestor was in the Civil War in Missouri, if they, signed up in Missouri, if they fought any battle in Missouri, if they were killed during the Civil War in Missouri, you can apply for that certificate. And we just announced last year the War of 1812 certificate. So same thing, if they were in a Missouri unit, if they fought in Missouri, if they died in Missouri, you can apply for that certificate. The Missouri State Society, Daughters of the American Revolution. So over 400 Revolutionary War veterans are buried in Missouri. So this is worth looking at, because if you find your ancestor's name, or if you don't know, and there's a common last name, you can find this list on their website of all these soldiers. And then if you go to the DAR national website, you can type in that name and you can see lineages. So you may be able to find ancestors that way. I've done that many times. I've been very successful with that. The Missouri County Formation History. This is a website with an interactive map. So this is going to show you when counties were formed, what counties they were formed from. So this is very helpful if you want to find, say, one of those marriage records that were kept at the county level, but you don't know when they start. The Missouri Folklore Society. This is not so much, going to help find an ancestor, but it does add context to some of the customs, beliefs, legends that your ancestor may have believed in, right? So Missouri has a lot of German immigrants, Polish, Irish. So if you know your ancestor fit into, say, one of these ethnic groups or melded into these groups because they often lived near each other, you can figure out maybe this is a legend my ancestor told. This may have been a folk craft that they took part in. So again, it just adds to rounding out the life of your ancestor. And now the Missouri Trail of Tears Association. This is, again, specific to those 3 Missouri routes along the Trail of Tears. This is going to show you maps of those routes, but does also include diary entries from those US soldiers who led those marches. So if your ancestor happened to be one of those people, you can find some of these original diary entries. And so I believe we now have time for some Q&A.
We do have some questions for you. So our first one is wondering if you might be able to provide insight into how traveling salesmen might have been documented or counted in the census in city directories. And she says this would be prior to World War I.
In city directories, I've never actually seen a specific mark for traveling salesmen. I've only seen like salesmen. So I don't know that they were ever listed as a separate type.
Another question that we have, this person says a great-grandfather may have had a contract to do repair work for what was called the first asylum for the insane at Fulton. Do you have any suggestions as to where to search for records kept by the institution or about the institution sometime, and this would be sometime between 1850 to 1870?
So Missouri, like asylum records, things like that are not public record.
Okay.
So I've like requested information from, the Missouri Department of Health, as a genealogist, no go. So I had, the client request as a family member, no go. So they're not made available to the public, if they even exist anymore.
Okay.
So a lot of these files actually were, when these institutions closed, literally taken outside and thrown into a dumpster.
Mm.
So your odds are not great. Now, because he was not a patient, if you know that company that he worked for, try to research those business records. So I would start probably with the Mercantile Library, and then the Secretary of State, the state archives, because
Sounds good.
they're gonna have the most business records.
Our next question, someone's asking, is there a certificate for any ancestors who fought in a Missouri unit in the Mexican-American War?
Not to my knowledge. That's actually a good suggestion for the Missouri State Genealogical Association. That could be our next certificate. Yeah, I think we don't think about that too much up in Missouri. Well, as a nation, I don't think we think about the Mexican-American War all that much. Yeah, I will write that down, and suggest it to the other members of the board.
We have someone who's asking, what year does the publicly available available birth certificates start for the state?
I believe it is 72 years.
Okay.
That may, so I believe there was a petition going around. I know it is on the handout that I gave you, Reclaim the Records. They have a database with some of that information. So you can search the name. It is not going to give you the actual certificate. But if you are closely enough related, you can request it.
Mm-hmm.
Whether they send it to you, um, so the way it works, it's sort of been hit or miss, honestly. Because I can say I am, you know, the great granddaughter of this person. Um, well, they say, well, you're still not closely related enough. I can say I'm ordering it as a genealogist for someone, and they still, still won't send it, even though it's
Yeah.
been that length of time. So sometimes it honestly seems to be just who gets your request,
Mm-hmm.
what mood they seem to be in that day.
Our next question, someone's asking, they say, rumor has it that my brick wall great-great-grandmother helped Jesse James' mother after her house was firebombed. She says, I would love to prove that. Where can I look?
I would start with the Jesse James Museum. So I'm not sure what county that's in. Um, I don't know that they have records, but
Mm-hmm.
I would ask them.
Okay.
Because there is the Jesse James Museum, there is I think the Jesse James House as well. Um, Now there is also a rumor in my family that my great grandfather sold moonshine to Jesse James. So I think if you're in Missouri, um everybody wants a link to Jesse James. So not saying it's not true, you know. My ancestor may have sold whiskey, yours may have firebombed. So also look through, I can't, I'll have to look. Um, Send me an email because there is a database somewhere that recorded or tried to record some of this like guerrilla warfare during that time. So I'll try to find that. I just can't remember off the top of my head what it is.
Wanted to say thank you to Kate again for presenting, and thank you to everyone for attending.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.